Woof woof.
Welcome to the Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism. Whether you're a news junkie, a curious learner, or just looking for a fresh perspective away from the corporate media, this is the show for you. So join us now as we dive into the world of independent journalism on the Independent Review.
Welcome to the Independent Review. Today's show includes clips from Charlie Robinson, the Indie News Network, Derrick Broze, the Union of the Unwanted podcast, and James Corbett. Let's take a look at our first clip with Charlie Robinson on the masterminds of 9/11.
So let's talk about 9/11. It's for my generation, it's our Kennedy assassination. We've talked about 9/11 plenty on this. It was the event that woke me up to all of this fuckery. It is the event that keeps on giving. If you are, if you were there, I was 28. I was 28, about to be 29 when it happened. I was in Manhattan Beach, California, living there, watching it with my roommates, and your mind is blown. And we were a group of guys that had a pretty good sense of humor about things. There was nothing funny about that day. It was rough, and I'd love to say I knew right off the bat that there was something fishy, but I really didn't. I didn't know what I didn't know, and now I think looking back on it, now we know quite a bit. And one of the things I want to do with this episode is get into the naming of names. We've talked about this a lot. We've mentioned some names. We've mentioned the guys from the Project for a New American Century and the Israel connections and the Saudis and some of those people. But I want to escape from mere generalizations and name some names, talking about who was really masterminding this. Depends on how you want to think of it. This is the high level operations. These aren't the guys that rigged the detonators. These are the guys that came up with the concept of 9/11 and knew where they needed to put their people and knew where the pressure points were. They knew how the government worked. I think that's an important component to this. Now, if you and me and a couple of friends get hammered tonight and we start talking about how we're going to do the next 9/11, it's only so far we can take it, right? We might be able to say, well, the government would do X, Y, and Z. We think they'd do that. But truth is, we don't work in the government. We don't know the ins and outs of that. We don't know where the soft spots are. We don't know what the government actually can do, and what they really can't do. We don't know who would be in charge of hunting us down, and we don't know how they would be able to figure out who it was. But I'll tell you what, the people that planned 9/11, they knew how it worked. They knew how to turn off the security system before they left. Do you understand what I mean? They knew how to lower the defenses and create a scenario in which it was easy for this thing to happen. And part of it was the deep planning and putting their people in positions of power that they could make things happen or prevent other things from happening, meaning like investigations or whatnot. But also just knowing the method of operation of the government is extremely helpful. So you've got to have people in this planning phase that know what will happen. If A happens, then B happens. They need to know what happens in that scenario. They need to know, well, it's going to go from this office to that office, and then from that office to this guy, and then this guy is going to contact all these people, and then those people are going to do this. If you know the process, you can make sure that it doesn't happen the way it normally does. You can make sure that it happens the way you need it to. And so when I'm not going to be talking too much about the middle management of 9/11. I'm not going to be talking about the people that got on the telephone and issued the stand down orders, and I'm not going to talk about the people that were in the basement level of Building 7 rigging detonators or anything like that. What we're going to talk about is the high level masterminds behind 9/11, who they were, what their backgrounds were, why those people were perfect for this operation, and how they connected into this, how they plugged into this whole scenario, this deep state scenario. I'm not going to be coming at this I'm not going to be covering the Saudi component. I'm not going to be talking about the Israeli or the Pakistani side. This is going to be strictly the Americans that were in charge of this operation. Now, I'm going to mention some of the Saudis and I'm going to mention some of the Israelis, but this is not meant to be a complete deep dive into every single person that was involved in 9/11. We're taking the top 5 of them, okay? If you want to talk about this and think of this as the board of directors of 9/11, you can think of it like that. Not the C-level people, not the middle management people, but the board of directors, the people, the advisory board, the people that you would go to if you were in a process of trying to pull off 9/11 beforehand, and you'd say, I have a question that only about 5 people in the world could possibly answer. These are the 5 people you'd go to discuss how we would actually move this process of destroying America and kickstarting the war on terror. So these are the 5 people that would be in a position to know. Thanks for watching that clip. If you want to hear the entire episode in audio format, just go wherever podcasts are served, search for Macroaggressions, subscribe to the show, and please rate it when you get a chance. Thanks, everybody.
Now let's jump to this clip from the Indie News Network on the Biden admin wanting to private our water supply.
Who are these people?
The government has grown a lot of balls since the past couple of years. We've known that like the agenda behind privatizing water has already been like in the talks for a while, but now it's completely out loud. It is they're saying it to your face.
Yeah, and it's not even like a discussion. They're more like, oh, we should do
It's more
this.
like we should do this.
Yeah.
So now we know, thanks to CISA, a CISA document, that the Biden administration is, or at least someone in the Biden administration is looking to privatize the water supply. This is an article from Peter Coffin, who shout out to Peter Coffin. I know there was like a Common Dreams article on this. I thought it sucked. I thought this was like a way better article.
Common Dreams is like
Common Dreams. Well, Common Dreams is fucking like they're liberal. It's liberal bullshit at this point. Like I used to like them when I was like a little like less awake, but
exactly.
Now I see the agenda that they're pushing, and now it's like okay, now
it's like Jacobin. It's like Jacobin.
Exactly. But I mean, shout out, Peter Coffin had a good, really good take on this. But today, the ruling class doesn't have to hide its agenda. Rather than classify everything, they can openly disclose without promotion, letting information get lost in endless content, such as the report from the Biden administration's National Infrastructure Advisory Council, which the Food and Water Watch brought to light, which have been on this for years, which they're really good. The report would likely have otherwise gone unnoticed, and outlined within the document is an endorsement to privatize American water systems. Yes, really. And this is the openly fantastic thing that I've seen from the U.S. admin in my lifetime. Arpum defines fascism as a terrorist dictatorship of big capital, resulting from crisis arising from capitalism's contradictions and inherent instability.
Okay, is it worth kind of simplifying that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, that kind of really puts together what we were talking about last time with
just
imperialism, capitalism.
Like, driving home that fascism is not an aesthetic. It's actually when
we live in a fascist state. This is a
corporate power is making all the rules.
It's not a question. We're living in a fascist country. This is not a question anymore.
Yeah, I know, especially from being terminally online, we like to throw around the word fascist, but there's like an actual freaking.
But the fascist government, right? They're all of them.
All the Western ones, it's all more or less the same. But yeah,
more or less, yeah. You can see what's happening in Nigeria and France. All these imperial powers come together, but here sort of like outlines like the ongoing water crisis that we have. It's going on. So with the increasing concerns over the stability of our nation's critical infrastructure, the NIAC report articulated potential ramifications. So the infrastructure of the U.S. is a pressing issue. Water is a problem more widespread than people might realize. People will probably recognize Flint, Michigan, led to national.
I have a great meme for that one.
Flint, that poison water. No one has to remember.
That was Flint. Was what? By the way, Flint was what? 12 years ago. Still doesn't have clean water.
More than that, yeah. 12 years ago, no, still no clean water. Still no clean water at all. What about Florida? What's it called? There was another city that.
Well, there was East Palestine back a few months ago. They're not doing shit
East
there.
Palestine, but I remember either Georgia or Florida.
Oh yeah, there was a Jacksonville. Either
Jacksonville is like
Kansas, Jacksonville, Kansas, or something like that. There was another place. Yeah, I'd have to find that. But we have a history of just kind of letting our infrastructure go to shit and then pretending that it's not as bad as it is.
Yeah. The 2023 NAIC report, like
Jackson, Mississippi. Thank you, Dr. Nick. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yes,
I did that meme, and it was like a banger. So remember that.
In 2018, Cape Town, South Africa, a city of 4 million people, faced the possibility of day zero, when a day taps in a city would run dry. Persistent droughts for 3 years, increasingly harsh measures. That had not sufficed. Fortunately, the rains came, reservoirs were replenished. And could a day zero happen in the U.S.? Anyone with proximity to or the acknowledgement of issues like Michigan, we should be able to realize that these are real issues that people are dealing with, and that beyond water, we can consistently see our infrastructure collapsing and failing across the country, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because, like I said, we are living in a post-capitalist collapse.
Like it's self-evident, right, that if we're at the point where corporations are now like, we need to privatize all water, that's kind of should be like a signal to people that society's falling apart.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I moved to Colorado years ago, in much of Colorado, I want to say a lot of Colorado, I knew people who had illegal runoff tanks on the back of their houses because Colorado does not allow you to collect runoff because the Colorado River water is also leased out to freaking Nevada and California, I think. So we're not allowed to collect rainwater. Like that's how this shit's been going on fucking forever. It's just getting worse and worse and worse.
They have like similar language, like more enterprises engaging net zero or zero liquid discharge go out.
Come on. We're going to be recycling our fucking toilet water, freaking cook our pasta.
So this is really where the juice is. Rising incidents of water crisis create the need for holistic emergency management. Wonder what that is. Water is a lifeline sector that serves communities, industries, and businesses daily and has the power to bring them back to normal after disaster. As stated previously, community water systems are not typically connected to adjacent systems, unlike electricity and transportation infrastructure, which are interconnected to national networks. Here it is with the climate change. With climate change and increasing water scarcity, as long as the high-intensity precipitation events, the number of significant water crises dramatically increased. So this is like the train that they're
the premise.
This is how we deliver this water crisis. We need to have climate change mixed in there. Maybe we can throw in like a transphobia somehow. I don't know how.
Make it about trans rights.
Yeah, and
I mean, of course, it goes without saying. Of course, we'd know it. They'd make it about fucking climate change.
Recommendations to aid infrastructure owners and operators: create incentivize and enforce standards for water use and quality, promote at the state, tribal, and local levels that new development demonstrates access to a sustainable water supply, streamlined to the permitting process, which can take 8 to 10 years, incorporating regulatory teeth, in quotations, into source water protection.
Can we just take a moment to recognize that, like, this is what happens when you commoditize fucking water?
Fucking water!
They're trying to freaking tell you how to appropriately use water. What, are you going to push a button and for 30 seconds the, like, lukewarm water is going to come out of your freaking shower hose? Oh,
we already don't tax food. Like, we understand that that's like, okay, we sort of need this, and it would be kind of ridiculous if I had to pay the government every time I needed something that I literally need to live. And now we're going. Let's make it private. Let's privatize the whole thing. No one can have water.
Or no. That's not the excuse. What capitalists say, no one can have water. Anybody can have water if
you have the money.
If you want the water, it's there for you to purchase. No
Right.
one's stopping you from buying the water.
They'll make it. Well, that's the framing. It's like it's the freedom of being able to purchase your own water, which should be free in the fucking first.
And it's like what I was telling you yesterday. It's like you're not even buying water; you're buying the plastic water bottle.
Yes, exactly.
Like the water was already there. These companies like Nestle are not in the business of making water; they're in the business of packaging it.
Absolutely not. We're going to show some stuff about that too. Look at this. Remove barriers to new ways of funding water projects. They're literally saying
they're going to IMF ourselves.
Look, remove barriers to privatization, concessions, other non-traditional models of funding community water systems. Get rid of it. Stop the public water system. Allow access to privately owned water providers to Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. That's
straight up fascism.
Support and incentivize regionalized of water systems by reviewing the state capacity development policies and ensure beneficial regionalization. A safe harbor from regulatory penalties. They want no one can be sued.
Free liability.
They don't want anyone. They don't want to get into any trouble. And absorb troubled systems for a reasonable time period.
What's going to be the thing that's going to freaking drive people to go to people's houses and start taking matters in their own hands? Because water might be it. You tell people, oh, hey, you can only have freaking, 2 liters of water a day for your family of 3 or 4. Like, you're going to have people start getting violent. This is crazy.
I'm looking up. Yeah, look, remove barriers to new ways.
So all that means, okay, so that's freaking crazy to me, because that sounds like basically like, how part of how we do imperialism on other countries is we privatize resources and we create funding to privatize those resources. And things have gotten so bad that we're doing it to ourselves now. We're going to create even more debt for ourselves by the government subsidizing private companies like Nestle to sell water back to us. This world is broken.
And if anyone remembers, there does happen to be a rare video that no one can seem to find on YouTube of the CEO of Nestle saying water is not a human right.
You guys might have heard this before, but this is like, it comes up once in a while. And just to let you know, this has been memory hold to what on YouTube.
You cannot find it anywhere.
They work their asses off.
Thank God for Alan McLeod. I don't know how this is not taken down already, but I'll say some of the subtitles.
Okay.
Rohmaterial, das wir heute noch auf der Welt haben. Und es geht darum, ob wir das normale Wasserversorgung der Bevölkerung privatisieren oder nicht. Und da gibt es 2 verschiedene Anschauungen. Die eine Anschauung, extrem würde ich sagen, wird von einigen von den NGOs vertreten, die darauf pochen, dass Wasser zu einem öffentlichen Recht erklärt wird. Das heißt,
That means
als Mensch
that as
sollten
a
sie einfach
human
Recht
being,
haben,
you should have a right
Wasser
to
zu haben.
water. It sounds crazy, right?
Amazing.
Das ist die eine
That's an
Extremlösung.
extreme
Ja?
solution.
Und
Whoa,
die andere,
says
die sagt, Wasser
water is
ist
a
ein
foodstuff
Lebensmittel,
like any other.
so wie jedes andere Lebensmittel, sollte das einen Marktwert haben. Ich persönlich glaube, es ist besser, man gibt einem Lebensmittel einen Wert, sodass wir alle bewusst sind, dass das etwas kostet und dann anschließend versucht, dass man mehr spezifisch für diesen Teil der Bevölkerung, der keinen Zugang zu diesem Wasser hat, dass man dann dort etwas spezifischer eingreift und da gibt es ja verschiedene Möglichkeiten. Also.
Man, there's so many things wrong with this fucking minute. It's just like the idea that water exists and therefore we should have the right to sell it, and therefore because it has the right to sell it, it has some value attached to it, and we should be able to make money.
That is
it's like, such a depraved.
I don't even think a libertarian would agree with. I think if you talk to a normal libertarian, I don't even think they would take this. Well, no, I'm pretty.
I don't know.
I'm pretty positive that a libertarian would be like, no, this is insane. Maybe I'm wrong. Prove me wrong. Maybe there's some like insane people out there, but. Thanks.
Hey, it's a free market. It's a free market. Just get a job from.
You want your water? Well, it has a price. Sorry.
Freaking crazy. But
he talks. Peter. The reason I like this article is because Peter talks a lot about. He's a Marxist, he's a communist, and he talks a lot about theory within the context of like current day things, which I really enjoy. So. I'll read a little bit of some of this here. To privatize the water system is to create the basis to deny an essential building block of life. Many different schemes might be proposed too, in which they might be said that no one will be not denied water. Still, taking ownership of water and related infrastructure away from public removes its accountability to the public good. When something is publicly owned, the public is at least supposed to have recourse. While it certainly is imperfect, water and infrastructure should be accountable to all and not a board of capitalists capable of acting like beyond their class interests. And the dyed and wool conservatives I've spoken to agree entirely with me on this issue. Like I said, I don't even think a libertarian I think a libertarian would think this is insane.
I mean, who are the people really pushing this? Is it just the freaking like oligarchs in like upper echelon capitalists that are doing this, or is this kind of like a conservative or even like corporate wing of the Democrat Party kind of thing that they're pushing? Because it seems to me that the whole privatizing water thing has been going back and forth for freaking decades, and now it's just getting to the point where they're like, no, we want to privatize all of it and you're not going to have any choice.
Yeah,
and we're gonna do it off the premise of 15-minute cities. And if you go over your limit, we're going to charge you out the ass for it. It's just nightmare after nightmare.
Today, we're seeing a more complex, progressive justification, like I showed you. Climate change. It's more important to say that I'm not here to tell you that climate change doesn't exist or that humans have no effect, but that there's plenty of evidence to suggest otherwise. However, the climate change framework is presented as a spectacle rather than scientifically endlessly.
Wow. Thank you, Coffin, for making such a fucking great point there. That's actually a really salient point. I'm glad that he mentions that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to show this. Like prompting pessimism and nihilism, that this is leverageable as justification that they should own the fucking water. Science is an ongoing. We're seeing this with COVID. That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Like this is the active. Mm-hmm. This is the train. This is the activator of how they take away every single last right that you have. I saw an article today that showed like the anti-chipping movement.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm gonna pull that up. But
so while you're pulling that up, do you remember a couple of years ago there was that psychologist or academic Matthias Desmet, and he posited the whole like mass formation psychosis thing. And like that was during the beginning of COVID, people were freaking out and all that stuff. And, it got debunked a lot. And I think they're still trying to use that kind of mass psychosis as a way to freak people out to get to the point where they're like, oh, I guess we really need to conserve water. I guess we really need to conserve our energy. Oh my God.
Anti-chippers are the latest group of awful people we now have to worry about. This is the new COVIDian. This is the new angle that they attach to that.
They're really trying. They're really trying.
Now, if you don't want the chip, if you don't want the chip, you're a Trumper now. That's the way they roll. It's like through this progressive justification, exactly like he says. And science is an ongoing effort that ultimately works toward the discovery of solutions, but science experts in the media often shit on technological solutions. Further, we need to stop seeing, carbon as a problem. Like, we explained the actual effects of climate change. Science can be manipulated to serve political and economic agendas.
I'm glad he's bringing up Bookchin because I got some stuff to say about that. Oh, well, he's actually invoking a little bit of anarchist theory here, but like basically he's making a really good point here that the issue is not that we're like developing new technologies. And, I think most of us can agree that in the right hands, or when it's not incentivized by profit, technology can be great for everybody. Okay. Like, what's his name?
If it's not based on profit, yeah.
Like Kropotkin wrote in Conquest of Bread, he was basically like, if we had the means of production, we would automate the shit out of everything, so we had more time for ourselves, and thus technology was serving us. But the problem is that the technology is serving capitalists, and they're not going to do it so that we can have 10-hour work weeks. They're going to do it so that we can have 40-hour work weeks and work 3 times harder than we do now.
This is a good point here. Climate change is a convenient means to demand ideological alignment of the subordinate class, as anarchist Murray Bookchin specifically did, whether he realizes it or not. This is a quote from him. Questions of growth, profit, and the future of the planet are no longer single issues or clash issues, but human and ecological issues.
They're virtue signals.
Exactly. This removal of the consideration of the class divide enables a high strata of the ruling capitalist class to bring a lower capitalist strata to the reactionary elements of the working classes into service, leading into illusion theorists like Hannah Enderfeld for the deterioration. The characteristic feature of fascism is that, in a consequence of a shock suffered by the capitalist economic system and the special objective and subjective circumstances, the bourgeoisie utilizes the discontent of the petty and the middle, urban and rural bourgeoisie, and even certain strata of the D-class proletariat for the purpose of creating a reactionary mass movement. And this is what we see in all of the destabilized countries. All of these like right-wing movements like start popping up. This happened in Yugoslavia, I can tell you that for sure. Like the economy collapses, fascism increases, right-winger, like the conservative, like reactionary. It doesn't even have to necessarily be conservative, just a very extreme reactionary, like nationalist type mentality.
Really, I guess the really simply way put, I would kind of see what Bookchin is saying here is that like capitalists are going to act cynically 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100. And it's going like when, and it goes back to kind of like how our culture is molded by the bourgeoisie. Like these things that we get encouraged to participate in is not things that are generally aligned with, the plight of the workers. It's actually in the image of, the capitalists and the bourgeoisie.
Yeah. This is an important point here I wanted to make. Like, while leftists might want to assert that fascism is a right-wing ideology, it's not left or right wing. It's not specific to a wing of the liberal political spectrum. Like, we have to get past this idea of left and right. I don't even think it exists. Personally,
I don't really think it exists either. Like, if
I don't think it exists. I think I talk to like a lot of people about their political views, and like it's really like it's a mixed bag, and it's not even like there's people who like are like against the. I know plenty of trans people, like trans friends, who are against the trans like kids thing, and then I know plenty of like other like people who are like against abortion, but they're like, for BLM and all that. And like, it's always like a mixed, and it depends on your environment and your experiences. We're talking about people here. We're not like, you can't be programmed to a specific like section of like, well, I guess you can through the media, but everything.
I mean, like the political compass shit I think is like total horseshit and doesn't make sense at all the way it's like made like designed, because like you said,
it's
people are much more nuanced.
Like it's more like entropy and like stagnation. Does that make any sense? It's not like left or right. It's more like we should put movement into this, or we should like halt this. Does that make any sense? Like I don't think politics is like on a wing. I think it's like there's like a.
So I mean that's kind of an interesting thing, because like it's like if I was to try and define, if I was to define, depending on how I describe my politics to people, they will either describe it as right wing or left wing, depending on how, like, what kind of team sports they do. Because I can describe anarchism in a way that's about liberty, your right to own your guns, the like right to pursue your own interests, and the right for the government not to tell you what to do. Those all sound like pretty conservative views, right? But at the same time, I could be like, yo, property shouldn't exist. Private property shouldn't exist. The government shouldn't exist, and it's like, I don't think you get more left than that. So like, I'm kind of with you on that it's almost like left and right is there just to divide.
It's just to distract. In my opinion,
it's like the thing that like a common thing people like, if you ask people a question, what's the answer to our failing democracy or electoralism? Is it more parties or less parties?
It's got to be more. Like,
are you sure about that?
When you have the Democratic Party, like talking about like there's
the answer is no parties, zero parties. Yes. I was not making a like a reference there with the okay. I'm just like saying zero.
Well,
the idea is that when you lock people into a certain,
it depends. I was thinking more so like in terms of like our current stage, but like ultimately I agree with you. First, there's a lot of things that we need to tackle first before we even like get to like that. Like before we like completely like reshape our political system. We need to get money out of politics. That's number one. And if we don't do that, then everything's gonna be fucked forever. That's where we're at. That's where we're at. And unfortunately, that's where it's gonna be unless we're really willing to have a general strike or something.
That's really what needs to come down to, because
it's coming down to that. It's coming down to that.
Remember, there was like a really, really important point that we brought up last week that really ties into this very well, and that's that the top 10% of wealthy people in the United States are single-handedly responsible for saying our economy is growing. Okay, the top 10% have more wealth than the bottom 90%, so they can trade fake pieces of paper all day long on their little computers and still say that the economy is growing while it costs twice as much as it did last year to get your groceries. So there's a huge fucking contradiction there. And so getting money out of politics, while it sounds like a great idea, I think like we need to, like you said, general strike. I would go so far to say a debt strike. I would go so far to say like student loan strike. Like just
student loan strike.
Stop paying your fucking bills, guys. It's gonna hurt for a few years. I promise you.
I'm calling it right now. I tell everyone, burn your student loans. Don't pay them.
Don't pay your student loans. I mean, it's gonna hurt for a couple of years, and then they're gonna see. That fucking almost $2 trillion.
I'm not going to recommend that. This is not financial advice.
No, it's not financial advice, but it worked for me.
This is not financial advice. Please don't take this as financial.
Trash your credit for a few years. Fuck your fucking school debt, because it's a way to freaking extract rent from you from the rest of your life. Okay? I firmly believe that there's an element of putting people into the institution of college as a means to have them be indebted servants for the rest of their lives. You've seen that stuff on Twitter. You've seen that stuff on Facebook where a lady could be in her 50s or 60s and she's still paying freaking $800 a month to her fucking school loans. That's just like a lifetime of having money being taken out of your pocket for an education that was supposed to help you put money into your pocket. So I'm kind of firmly of the belief of like just trashing your credit for a few years, waiting for them to come back and be like, all right, we'll settle with you, or like, it's just if we all realize, and instead of getting like hooked thinking about like game theory and how we have to just like that people are going to like be self-interested, if we all just trusted each other and we all just striked at the same time and we all just did that shit, like the banks would be fucked within a week. You have 100 million people.
That's why they crush railroad strikes immediately, because they can shut down the fucking country.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you shut down the country, they get scared, and that's the point.
Like, do you remember?
No one knows that's the point. We'd rather block traffic or like do some other weird shit.
I'm like,
go to a wedding and like.
I really hope a debt strike happens, because
let me read this one last quote.
Okay.
The old ignorant Malthusian notions of the absolute overpopulation or the modern lugubrious chance of birth control as a necessary solution of poverty are thus abundantly exploded by facts. It is worth noting that this reactionary propaganda is still maintained not only in clerical conservative quarters, but also by the would-be progressives.
Mm-hmm.
Privatizing water while sold as that's written in 1934, by the way. Privatizing water while sold as a means to innovate is actually a means to an end, the advancement of production and technique. Technological innovation will happen one way or another and eventually gets into the way of profits, but the true innovation is these policies that encourage is an enclosure by transforming commonly held resources into privately owned assets. So raw water privatization is a massive heightening of contradictions and a drastic move. So this should be shocking to everybody. This is not a drill. This is they're really talking about it now. And this if this is in the talks, you already know that it's there's a plan lined out.
So I wonder what that's going to look like. Does that, because I mean we pay our water bills, so technically, it's available to us, but it's still kind of commoditized in a way that we're paying the government to use the water utilities. So if it was privatized, would that mean that kind of like we get our utility?
It would be like Comcast. You know how like
so you get utility bill from Nestle.
Or something. How like Comcast and like T-Mobile, like they all have like they basically own a monopoly on the market. That would basically be the same exact thing. It would be like you pay for your water bill to a private company. It's not a public utility anymore.
It'd be like you pay instead of
they can shut it off at any time. They can shut it off whenever they want.
Crazy.
And I showed in the document they don't want anyone suing them. They don't want any sort of public
and especially in light of freaking water that was all shut off during the Maui fires, it's just like, we could do that shit again.
Then you begin to wonder, like maybe this is all connected. The water crisis. Remember when Kamala Harris said that like there's going to be a water crisis not too long ago?
Yeah, was that a Freudian slip? Sometimes I can't tell if they're actually like, oh, did they accidentally just like give away the game, or are they like just so high on drugs all the time because they can't form complete sentences sober that they just spew things. Like, that's what I don't know about Kamala. Sometimes Kamala just like says things and I don't know whether she's accidentally like giving away the game or just like shooting from the hip. But that's crazy.
I can't find that video, but here is Bill Burr.
Which one were you looking for?
Kamala Harris saying, there's going to be a water emergency or something like that.
Pull up Bill Burr. I'll see if I can find it.
Classic Bill Burr on his response to the Nestle CEO, who thinks that your water is not a human right.
Stuff that they focus on. You know what I mean? There's a guy from Nestle that doesn't think water is a human right. I mean, that guy should be hunted down and shot. Yeah. Right? And they're going to sit and just talking about all the, I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, we got to get America back to work.
It's like, dude, this guy wants to own the rain. Can we do something about this guy? He was at Nestle. You're supposed to be happy, like making cocoa for people. And this guy's like going, well, people are running out of water. What if we owned all the water and we kept it under our place? And in the future, when everybody's, that's how you picture the guy talking. I want to own the water. I want to have it underneath my house. And just, I'll come to the door in a robe, slightly ajar. Right? It's a complete animal.
Next is this clip from Derrick Broze and his interview with Ted Walter on 9/11 Justice.
This is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today I have a very important conversation to share with you, especially as we are approaching the next anniversary of the September 11th attacks. For those of you who've been following my work over the last decade plus, you know that I've covered 9/11 beginning in 2011, attending conferences and events in New York City, Washington, D.C., trying to raise awareness in Houston, where I'm from. And I've interviewed a number of guests over the years who've focused on different angles of the 9/11 crime and trying to bring truth, trying to bring awareness to that conversation. One of these folks is Mr. Ted Walter, who I last interviewed, I'm looking here at the website, September 17th, 2014. It was at the 13th anniversary when we originally talked, and this was when there was the New York City high-rise safety initiative, which I thought was a really creative effort. And now Ted is still in the fight 9 years later and continuing this journey. Ted, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Derek. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, well, it's always exciting for me to see people who are staying on the course of these topics, like such a big issue like 9/11. Obviously, the goal here would be 9 years later, the world has woken up and everybody has, realized there's questions about 9/11 that remain, and we have made progress. Unfortunately, I don't think that's exactly where we're at. I think progress has been made. I think there's public awareness. Like, just as one example, I noticed one of the Republican presidential candidates, Vivek Ramaswamy, he's been bringing 9/11 back to the conversation, and whatever people think about his policies, I kind of think it's a good idea or good place to be that CNN is having to ask a presidential candidate, do you think 9/11 was an inside job? Do you think we were lied to about 9/11? That's some progress. But overall, in terms of actual investigation, like from a legal standpoint and holding people accountable, we haven't achieved that goal yet. There's still many people like yourself working on these efforts. So I wanted to give you a chance to come speak to my audience, those who maybe didn't catch our first interview all the way back in 2014, to give everybody a chance to see, first off, maybe you can tell about what you were working on back then and how that high-rise safety initiative went, and then talk about the work you're doing now with the organization you're involved now, and then we'll go from there.
We met back in 2014. I was working on the high-rise safety initiative, as Derek mentioned. And a lot has gone on since then. That was 9 years ago. At the time, the goal with that campaign was to try to get an initiative on the ballot in New York City that would amend the New York City charter to essentially require the Department of Buildings to conduct a new investigation into the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 specifically. We kind of tailored the initiative such that it would be, if you amended the city charter, it would be retroactive, and then the Department of Buildings would have to go back and investigate it. And so we had a big campaign. We actually gathered enough signatures in the city. I can't remember the exact requirements, something like 30,000. Got to get 30,000 and 15,000. We gathered over 100,000 signatures from New Yorkers who wanted a new investigation into Building 7 and into 9/11. As happened in 2008 and 9, the first initiative that I worked on that I got involved in New York City, we were prevented from being on the ballot. It's actually very hard. Ballot initiatives are much more common in other parts of the country, especially in the West. In New York, they're not as common, especially at the local level. And it's very, very hard. All the things that you have to do, the limitations and the constraints on initiatives at the local level in New York are very hard to kind of overcome. And so every time you write legislation to try to get on the ballot and amend the city charter, there's a good chance that your law that you're trying to pass may not be legal, or that the city will argue that somehow it's not in compliance with the New York State Constitution. or the city charter. So we ran into that. We did the best we could. We worked with some very good lawyers, and and I think the city could have let it go on the ballot. Of course, they weren't going to. There was a lot of political pressure against it. Bill de Blasio was asked about it in press conferences, the mayor at the time, and nobody in the city government, certainly that ran the city, wanted to see this on the ballot. And so we were turned down, and we went to court. We lost in court. So it was good, though. We raised a lot of awareness, I think, and just as we did with the earlier ballot initiative in 2008, 2009, that was trying to actually establish a New York City-based 9/11 commission that also ran into the same obstacle. So since then, I actually worked for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth for 8 years, and left just at the beginning of this year, and started a new organization called the International Center for 9/11 Justice, which has a lot going on, and I'd love to talk more about. It essentially, for those of you familiar with some of the major organizations in the movement over the last 15, 20 years, the International Center for 9/11 Justice has brought together the Journal of 9/11 Studies, which has been publishing sort of the cutting edge 9/11 research since 2006, as well as the International Center for 9/11 Studies, which has been renamed the International Center for 9/11 Justice. And that organization hosted the Toronto hearings in 2011 and published the Toronto report a year later. And then the 9/11 Consensus Panel, which was started by leading 9/11 scholar David Ray Griffin and his colleague Elizabeth Woodworth, and published about 50 consensus points of that 20 experts in the 9/11 truth movement agreed on were solid evidence. It was brought together those, and we also, besides all the research that we're still publishing, that we're still conducting, we are also spearheading a number of initiatives, which I'd be happy to talk about.
Before we get into that, I just make a remark about the high-rise safety initiative again, just that I really do applaud those to try to get the 9/11 topic into the conversation in a way that obviously people didn't want the conversation in there, but I do just want to take a moment to applaud you and everybody. I'm sure it was a whole team of people who were involved with trying to bring 9/11 to the conversation on the local level in New York City. I think that is just really, really important and really incredible. And of course, not surprising to see it kind of blocked that way in the courts, not ruling in favor of investigating Building 7.
Thanks, Derek. And I know you understand the importance of working at the local level. So with your efforts to run and do things in Houston and run for mayor and whatnot.
Yeah, I think, it's like 9/11 is such an international topic, but it's big on the national level in the United States, of course. But New York City, where it actually happened, in my experience, when you go to New York City around 9/11 or just any events related to this research, when you talk to New Yorkers, there's plenty of New Yorkers who have questions about the event. So it's not surprising to me to hear you say that you got over 100,000 signatures of New Yorkers who were like, yeah, this sounds like a reasonable question, a reasonable investigation. So yeah, I just want to underline that again. Please continue. Let's hear more about what the International Center for 9/11 Studies is doing.
Yeah, so the International Center for 9/11 Studies was founded in 2008 by an attorney named James Gorley, who wrote several significant scientific papers in those days with folks like Kevin Ryan and Stephen Jones, these major figures in the 9/11 truth movement. And then, as I mentioned, hosted the Toronto hearings in 2011, which were important hearings held in Toronto on the 10th anniversary, bringing together almost all of the sort of leading researchers in the 9/11 truth movement. And eventually that resulted in a report that is sort of mirroring or responding to the 9/11 Commission report of real evidence that had been gathered over the past 10 years regarding what really happened on 9/11. The organization went fairly dormant for the last 10 years. And then after I left AE 9/11 Truth, Architects and Engineers 9/11 Truth, early this year, I approached James and the other people involved with that organization and basically pitched them on relaunching the International Center for 9/11 Studies as the International Center for 9/11 Justice, and bringing together these other organizations that sort of in the same cluster of groups doing credible, really good 9/11 research. And so that's what we ultimately have done over the last 6 months, is put together this organization, and this group of organizations, and relaunch the center. And the website is ic911.org. So as I mentioned, the Journal of 9/11 Studies is one of the pillars of the organization. It's been publishing research since 2006. And it is now, all of that information now, you can find it at the old website, journal-of-9/11studies.com, but also on the new website, ic911.org. And we're publishing new papers. The journal itself hadn't published that much in the last 5 years, and now is publishing papers again on a monthly basis. So we just, in June when we launched, we published a paper that I worked on with David Chandler, who's well known for studying the collapse of Building 7, especially also the Twin Towers. On an engineer named Tony Zambodi, we published a new paper on Building 7, which looks at how the entire roof line, we could actually, finally, if we've measured it all the way across the roof line on two sides of the building, and we've shown that the top of the building actually goes into free fall instantaneously. A lot of your listeners, your viewers already knew that the building came down in free fall, but now we've actually kind of verified that not only did it go into free fall, but the transition to free fall was instantaneous, which completely rules out any possibility that it was a series of structural failures that led to the collapse. Not that most people have any doubt when they look at it, when they study it, but we've ruled it out completely. If there was somehow free fall was going to occur as a result of a natural series of structural failures, the transition to free fall wouldn't be instantaneous, but it was in this case. And so that's very carefully documented in this paper. We've published a couple of the papers since then. So that's one major aspect of what we're doing. We're also spearheading initiatives like the family in the UK, the family of Jeff Campbell, who was killed in the destruction of the North Tower. His brother in particular, Matt, has been very active over the last several years, and his entire family are now involved in trying to open a new inquest into Jeff's death on 9/11. The process, an inquest, which is not that this process doesn't really happen in the US, is basically a sort of a fact-finding mission by a coroner to establish the facts and the cause, the sort of proximate cause of somebody's death. And so there was an inquest in 2013 for Jeff and the 9 or 10 other British 9/11 victims who they repatriated remains for, their physical human remains. Now, mind you, roughly 60 British citizens died on 9/11 in the attacks, and they only were able to collect remains for 10 of them. So this speaks to the fact that a huge amount of the victims of 9/11, their bodies, there's no trace of their body has been recovered, which is just more evidence that these buildings were blown up. But we're talking about very small pieces of fragments of bodies and so on, and 40% of the victims still haven't been identified. So out of those 60, 10 had their remains repatriated to the UK, and there were inquests held in 2013 for all of them, and concluded that the airplane that hit the North Tower ultimately caused its collapse and therefore Jeff's death. So the family, Matt Campbell and the rest of his family, are challenging that finding and saying that there was actually overwhelming evidence that was not considered at the inquest that disproves that conclusion, and so they're asking for a new inquest. And unfortunately, this was originally submitted 2 years ago. In August of 2021, the family submitted their application for a new inquest, and just a couple months ago, finally heard back from the UK Attorney General, who is the first hoop that they have to jump through. And the UK Attorney General denied their application, which is actually unlawful, and we are going to now appeal that decision by the UK Attorney General. Matt's family is going to appeal it, in which they're going to be filing their appeal documents over the next month, essentially. I could go into some of the details about that, but essentially it's supposed to be very easy for families to open a new inquest if there's any new evidence or evidence that wasn't considered at the first inquest that could possibly, conceivably change the verdict. And the Attorney General has essentially broken the law by denying their application, because the evidence that they presented on the face of it is overwhelming. And so there's certainly a possibility that could change the verdict in the cause of Jeff Campbell's death.
And so is that something that people can find more about on the website as far as that specific appeal of the inquest? Are you guys going to be following that?
Yeah. So we will be documenting that over the next month, their appeal. If you go to the website, we actually just took it down, but if you go to the website and you go into the news section, you can go back a few stories from July and learn more about the family, to see the statement that they released back in July when the Attorney General denied their application. So we will be doing that. And I think personally for me, this is one of the most important initiatives happening in the 9/11 truth movement. right now because it actually presents a real opportunity to have a real investigation in the court of law. And there's not that many right now. There's not that many avenues available to us to try to get a new investigation, given the political and the legal sort of blocks on this issue being looked at. So this is actually a very promising thing. This is a slam dunk, the application for a new inquest. It was a slam dunk, and the Attorney General has completely wronged the family. And so we are actually, although the judicial system in the UK is probably not very, probably corrupt, the law is so overwhelmingly in the family's favor that we think that we have a good chance of winning on appeal and actually getting this new inquest. So people can go to IC9 to follow
What
it.
would be the best case scenario there, Ted? Like, so obviously they win the appeal, a new inquest happens, but if the inquest did indeed find in favor of the family and concluded something like, hey, the death was the result of, explosives or something like that, where would it go from there? What would be the sort of, I guess, next step in that process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There is actually no automatic legal ramification that would be triggered if the coroner in the inquest were to conclude that it was explosives that brought down the building, that Jeff Campbell was killed in the demolition of the North Tower. It's not as if that automatically triggers the authorities in the UK to then go and investigate it, or anybody else for that matter, whether in the US or world bodies, what have you. However, we think that the political impact of that finding would resonate and reverberate throughout the world. I think that in general, it's important to not speak of the 9/11 families as a monolith, but in general, I think there's a lot of 9/11 families out there who would hear about that and would be educated about what may have really happened that day, and would then demand a new investigation. So I think it would really galvanize overall the 9/11 family community and the public in general to start demanding a new investigation. I think it would be very hard for the mainstream media. Not that we depend on the mainstream media, but I think even for the mainstream media, it would be hard for them to ignore this, dismiss it, what have you. So that's the goal here. And I think we could very quickly lead to a full investigation by British authorities as well.
Yeah, I think that, so it's kind of, even if it doesn't lead to any other, at the moment, legal ramifications, it gives those of us out here who are either trying to speak to people about 9/11 through the internet or still on the streets passing out flyers and things like that, it gives us another talking point, to say the least, to say, look, this investigation, X, Y, and Z, and this is why we should continue to ask questions about this. So whether it's a legal victory or not, it's something that we could use in the propaganda battle that we're really dealing with.
Absolutely. And even though it doesn't have immediate legal implications, it is inquests are taken very seriously in the UK. When there's an inquest on a controversial topic, they're widely reported, the results of the inquest. So it's not just going to disappear. Of course, we will have to work to publicize it. We will. The media will not be keen to cover it positively or at all. But I think that ultimately there won't be a way for them to ignore it. I think it will be widely known about.
Great. Yeah, I plan to write about it, and obviously we'll publicize that as widely as possible as we can and follow that story as well. Before we talk some more about some of the other projects that you guys have going on, because I know there's an upcoming documentary, I just wanted to ask your personal opinion and experience, Ted, because you've been in this probably as long as I have been, or maybe even before, and I know you've worked with a lot of the leaders in the movement, so to speak, who've been doing the really crucial work. Have you found in the last decade any kind of change politically, and in terms of either representatives, administrations, whether it was Obama, Trump, and now Biden, have you seen any sort of shift, whether positive or negative, in receptiveness to the 9/11 conversation?
I would say yes on the ground among regular people, absolutely. At least, where I live, people that I talk to, parents, I have a young child, and I talk to other parents, and I talk, just people my age, people a little bit older, a little bit younger. By and large, when I talk about what I do, 9 out of 10 times the person is either open-minded or already very supportive, right? Now, I might live in a very specific place. I live an hour north of New York City in the Hudson Valley, but I think that's probably the case in a lot of places. And I think we've kind of seen, wherever you are politically now, unless you are a diehard, I'm very in the middle. I like I trust every mainstream source there is. Regardless, I think people are more skeptical than ever, and I think that bodes well. And I continue to have, although it's an uphill battle, I continue to have real hope. And 9/11 is not the only issue, obviously, that's has people up in arms and very skeptical. There's many issues, 9/11 being one of them, and to some extent these issues are connected. So yeah, I think things are the climate is good now for this to be reopened or to be reconsidered in general by the public. As far as higher levels, officials, and so on, you see, like you said, Vivek Ramaswamy, he's talking about it. I think it's creeping in that there's more of a willingness to talk about it. There's and a little bit more pressure, and I expect that to increase. There are little cracks in the dam forming everywhere. I see, in my view. Several months ago, Tucker Carlson was on Redacted with Clayton Morris and mentioned Building 7. And that seemed to just put something in the water that like people here and there are a little more open to talking about it. And I think it's perhaps a matter of time before Tucker Carlson himself does a serious look at 9/11 and goes beyond the sort of Saudis and hijackers and stuff and goes further. So I think we're going to see that relatively soon.
Yeah, good signs to see, especially as we are now approaching the next anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And I know that you guys are working on releasing a new documentary. I had the pleasure of just watching it this last night. And it relates to, as you said, 9/11. It's not just 9/11 itself, but obviously 9/11 is connected to the issue of war, the war on terror that many of us have lived through the last couple of decades. I was in high school when 9/11 happened. So we've witnessed it, and we're seeing this sort of ramifications of the war on terror playing out in other areas, the security state as it relates to things like COVID-19. So 9/11 is extremely important. It connects to war, it connects to privacy, surveillance, etc. This new documentary, it looks at the life of researcher Graham McQueen and his work on 9/11, but also his life in general and his views on war. Could you tell us more about that and when people will get a chance to check it out?
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for watching it. I just love sharing it with people, and it's been an honor and a joy to make this film, which I started working on a year ago when my friend Graham told me that he only had months left to live because of the cancer that he'd been living with for the last few years. And so I asked him if he would be willing to do this interview, and he agreed to do it. We did it last October. Graham passed away this past April. So this documentary is very much sort of his final words, his transmission, which is a word that he uses in the film, to the world, before his passing. Graham was a leading scholar in the 9/11 truth movement. He studied, one of the things he's best known for is the eyewitness accounts of explosion in the towers. He studied the tens of thousands of pages of oral histories produced by the fire department in New York, and found 118 eyewitnesses to explosions among the firefighters. And he did other very notable research as well in the dynamics of the collapse of the North Tower. And so a lot of these things are covered in the film. And he wrote a very important book on the anthrax attacks and connecting the anthrax attacks to the 9/11 attacks, showing ultimately that the anthrax attacks were basically a botched attempt to pin the anthrax attacks on Al Qaeda and Iraq, and together frame them for the anthrax letters, which fell apart pretty spectacularly because some scientists started saying there's no way that this anthrax came from Iraq, and it must have come from U.S. labs. So that's also documented in the film as well. So the film covers a lot of ground, but it ultimately stems from Graham's interest in peace. He's been and being an anti-war activist for much of his life. He died at the age of 75, and probably for 50 years or more of his life, he was a very dedicated anti-war activist. And he ended up he taught religious studies at McMaster University in Canada, but he also he ended up starting something called the Center for Peace Studies at McMaster, and so he was a professor of peace studies as well. And so the whole discussion of 9/11 grows out of the sort of framework that he uses to talk about peace and war as a system, and not just war as a series of events that happen when one country decides to invade or bomb another country, but that the war system is ever present and all around us. And, both in the trillions of dollars that we spend every year that the U.S. spends and other governments spend every year on armaments, etc. But even in various aspects of our culture, and it just permeates everything. And so he talks about the war system and that there being a cold phase when there's not active killing, and then a hot phase when there is active killing. And he talks a lot about, and he's written a lot of papers on this, war triggers, being these events that do occur that are more often than not either managed or manufactured to get the war system from a cold into a hot phase, to basically to start active wars. And so 9/11 is essentially the mother of all war triggers. And so he talks about that, and most of the film talks about 9/11 and a little bit about anthrax. And Graham dedicated the last 17 years of his life to studying 9/11 because it was the ultimate war trigger for the war on terror, which was everything that he was against and the opposite of what he stood for. And so he dedicated himself to trying to end the war on terror by studying the 9/11 attacks. And so all of that story, both Graham's analysis and his personal story, is all brought out in this film. And we're very excited about it. And we think it's a very moving, compelling way to present this information to audiences who are not yet familiar with it.
And I don't know if we've said already or if you guys have released the title of the film, but would you like to share what the title is and when people can find it?
Yeah, sorry about that. So it's Peace, War, and 9/11. Just that's it. Those are the things that it's about. Peace, War, and 9/11. And it's going to be, we're having the world premiere next week in Hamilton, where Graham lived and taught. That's where McMaster University is, in Hamilton, Ontario. And then it's going to be coming out online on YouTube. Should be on September 8th. So keep an eye out for that. There's a couple different channels where it may actually release. So that has not been set yet, but you can find out on ic911.org when it comes out next Friday. We'll also be having a New York premiere on Sunday, September 10th. So if you're anywhere near New York City, it's at Cinema Village. Come check it out, 6 p.m. the eve of the 22nd anniversary, and you can find the details about that premiere at ic911.org.
Awesome. That's great work. I definitely recommend everybody, if you can make it in person, either of those screenings, go for it. If not, look for it online. I will be sharing all the links you've referenced today, Ted, in the show notes, and of course the website. Any other final thoughts you'd like to share with everybody? What are the ways people can help? Obviously, I'm sure donations for work like this help, but is there anything more direct people can do? Share the information, get involved in any kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, share the information. ic911.org has it all. It's practically a clearinghouse now for the best 9/11 research that's out there. As I said, the Journal of 9/11 Studies, the Toronto report, the 9/11 consensus points are all there. So just use that as a resource to share this information with folks. We're also, for example, right now we are republishing Kevin Ryan's book, Another 19. Was published a decade ago. It's one of the most important books in the history of the 9/11 Truth Movement, and it's now available for free on our website. So go check it out. That'll be easy to find if you go there right now. So share the information. Don't be afraid to talk about it, and ultimately have faith that that we can still get justice in this effort. That's why it is called the International Center for 9/11 Justice, because we are not looking backwards. We are looking forwards, and we're dedicating ourselves to getting justice for this event in our lifetimes. And so I encourage people to talk positively about 9/11, about why you care about 9/11. It's because it's a vehicle to creating the world that you want to see. So that's the last thing I like to encourage people to do.
I love that approach, Ted, and I do think it's a valuable approach to take in the 9/11 truth movement, which is obviously a monolith itself, and there's different viewpoints and sometimes infighting and this and that, but to have a kind of positive, forward-thinking approach focused on justice is probably the way we should be going forward now, 22 years past this event. And I encourage everybody who's hearing this will be released pretty soon here as we approach the anniversary. Look out for this documentary, look into what's going on with the inquest in the UK, and follow the work that Ted and his team are doing so you can be apprised of all the 9/11 information you need to know. And most of all, share it with your family. Don't be afraid to talk about this. So thank you, Ted, for joining me today. I appreciate you. And as always, everyone, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.
Now let's jump to this clip from the Union of the Unwanted on an update on the Maui fires.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm super stoked to be here. My name is Shelby. I am the founder of Unwanted, the platform for people who refused the bioweapon. But Scott was the one who invited me here today. So yeah, I'm actually boots on the ground here in Maui. I've lived here for 10 years. I'm originally from Idaho. So from like a very small country town. But when I first came to Maui, I lived in Lahaina on Front Street. I worked on Front Street for about 5 years. So I'm very familiar with the area, with everything that was destroyed, the people that were there. And I can tell you, like, I mean, obviously there's no certainty, but I feel, in my opinion, that this was the most nefarious domestic attack, or, people would not call America, Hawaii part of America. So maybe even just an attack on, the Hawaiian country. So yeah, no, I'm going to say that I have lots of theories that I could dive into, but hands down, this is not natural. Not natural.
Maybe we could ask you a few questions.
Yes.
Like, for instance, the mainstream report is that it's possibly due to down power lines because of the power company and or climate change. But what do the average person that your neighbors, friends, family who are living there, what do they think is behind this?
Well, so honestly, like, the temperature right now is like a little debated. People are torn, and even people that were pro medical freedom or against the vaccine thing, they're coming to this and saying, oh, maybe this is a natural disaster. Maybe it was power lines. The morning that it happened, really early that day, around 7 a.m., there was a fire due to a downed power line that somebody has on camera. However, they said that this fire was contained. And so that was really early on in the day. So as far as the flare up or how the afternoon got reignited, I don't believe it was power lines that were still active because they had been de-energized. So this would have had to have been the hotspot that they had left, which they did do, or just straight arson at this point. I've got lots of ideas of what it could be.
Yeah. Well, people were prevented from leaving, right? There was a lot of blockages. Some places the water was turned off. How you find water in Hawaii, right? That'd be hard, right? I'm kidding. The water was off. The kids were sent home, right? That was another thing that people talked about. There was just tons of weird, unusual things going on. We also know that Hawaii is very good at accidentally telling everybody that something that's not going to happen is going to happen. Remember when they had the bomb threat thing? I'm like, so they can accidentally tell people that there's emergency, but they can't actually tell people when there's emergency that there's emergency. So what's your theory on that? Why was that system not used, or was it used? And if it was used late, if that was the case, then inform us, because I'm not aware if it was used or not.
So it wasn't used, and we do have the most robust alarm system in the whole entire country. And it's kind of a local joke in Hawaii, because it goes off on the 1st of every month, and we all go, oh, it's time to pay our rent. There's the tsunami sirens, we all giggle about it. And they test it every single month. We know that it works. And, the state of Hawaii states on their own website that it's used for tsunamis, hurricanes, wildfires, lava, terrorist attacks. I mean, they say it's used for a multitude of different things. Do I think it wasn't sounded on purpose? Yes. I heard the one fucking Fall Guy that they used, and they said, oh, we didn't want people to run Mauka, and in Hawaii that means to the mountainside, and it's like no one would run to a fire, so that's just like, and then I think he resigned the next day. But you know, there's, if you, I'm really deep into this. I would say that the frequency of the alarm system is similar to like what you would see with all of these things that are blue that came out unscathed. The frequency of the actual alarm system could dampen the flames, and it would have been able to dampen the actual damage of the fire. And that's why simply it wasn't sounded. They wanted it to do as much damage as possible. And you know, there's lots of really interesting stuff out there. You can see like bass sound can extinguish fires. So it's something about the actual frequency of the alarm that keeps flames at bay. I really think that's a huge part of why they didn't do it.
Did the blue cars burn too, or were they unaffected?
Oh no, they didn't. I'm seeing people pulling
like
out
actual
blue pieces of fabric out of rubble and like blue pieces of paper.
Have we seen other video from other related or suspected incidents where a specific color or a blue color was left unscathed too? Internet sleuths.
That's a good question.
Because you would, unless it's because the TikTok videos and stuff, the YouTube videos, it seems to be like a little older and pretty base laser technology that's doing the picking a specific shade or something on spectrum and not igniting it. And I'm curious as to if Maui somehow, because there's the the smart city stroke AI governed island proposals going on, if they were just late to testing that particular style flavor of weapon. Or I don't know, because it seems like we would have at least seen something analogous prior.
Well, I mean, it's ironically like the same color as, you know, United Nations blue. Maybe it's meant to avoid this color, you know. And
have we put it up next to the Israeli flag?
Is 66.666. So why wouldn't it? Like they put everything in the open, right? And it's just like the Simpsons episode where they always reveal all this shit. The only thing after the laser attack is the blue tarp in the middle of the town, standing there perfectly. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I've seen the even personal videos. I sent one to Scott that was like incredibly graphic, and you know, right in the frame, every single item around it is evaporated, and there's a blue truck just sitting there. You're like, that's a little bizarre. Why is that one truck completely unscathed? And you know, I think there's so many questions to be asked about the vehicles themselves, and that's why they're putting up a military grade fence around it, and they're keeping, you know, a complete blackout in the media. You know, windshields are melted. You know, glass melting temperature is like over 2,600 degrees. You know, people like to sit there and talk about the aluminum, and I'm sorry, aluminum has a low melting point in my opinion. But when you talk about fucking glass melting, that's not normal. You know, and the certain things that are missing off of these vehicles are out of place. You know, there are some vehicles that are just incinerated in the middle of all standing houses where fire wasn't reached. So if there wasn't even fire in that area, why are those vehicles damaged? You know, I'm going to even take to the next step further. Like my mom, who escaped Lahaina, her vehicle is like a partial electric vehicle. Just a few days after leaving Lahaina, it completely imploded, and it was in good shape. And the whole entire electrical system imploded. It's dead. They just called us. They said it's not fixable. So I do wonder also if there was like some sort of, you know, like EMP situation going on there. There's like a lot of people that were unable to escape vehicles. And that's because the windows weren't working and doors weren't working. Why? You know, I think there's like so many questions to be asked. And, you know, if it was EMP, is that the reason the alarms didn't work? They actually were unable to work.
That would have to be extremely. It would have to be a fairly localized EMP to not take out the majority of the island, I would imagine. So it's your opinion that what caused the fire is a directed energy weapon, and specifically,
maybe.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about
Yeah.
a
Wouldn't deny it.
laser from space that will burn pretty much anything, besides the color blue, reflects the color blue.
It actually wouldn't have come from space. It would have come right from our telescope because we have a directed energy weapon on Haleakala volcano, which is about just 30 minutes away. I can see it from my window. And it's the most advanced fucking space laser in this side of the country besides Alaska. And they have it situated right on top of our telescope. The Space Force loves to talk about how proud they are of their directed energy laser on Haleakala. And I mean, you could point that right at Lahaina easily. Do I think maybe it came off Haleakala? I'm not convinced. We know that they also hook these do machines to Boeings. Something that's interesting that's being found out is all of the commercial private pilots that had recorded diaries upon landing on Maui on 8/8, their diaries are being scrubbed off of the air traffic control reports. So what were these pilots seeing from the sky? Why are they being deleted? What was going on above there? Then it takes it to the next level, step where they had a no flight restriction over West Maui a week after the fires were over. So August 13th to like August 23rd, they just said there's a no-fly zone. But they claimed the reason for that was because they needed a safe environment to extinguish the fire that was already put out.
Yeah, it is really weird, and especially about the directed energy weapon facility specifically on Maui. I first came across that with Ryan, Last American Vagabond. I saw first reporting on that, and so we have an article on the Substack, Last American Vagabond Substack, kind of expanding it out based on an interview Shelby had with Ryan. And this was like within a few days of the actual fire. This was the 15th, so it was like the next week. But there's information about this particular facility, the Amos facility, I believe it's called. And there's links to, first of all, just talking because, so many people are like, oh, direct energy weapons are a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy theory. That's not even real. But, it's actual real technology. We have Department of Defense documents talking about it, right? So it's easy to dispel any notion that it's not real technology. But then the actual facility itself, there's like two main directed energy weapon research facilities in the United States. And one of them happens to be on Maui. So just curious.
It's very curious.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
that's
this could be like espionage.
The link I put into the private chat just now is that little 2-page report that talks about the Amos site and its location and what it does and all that kind of stuff.
I would imagine that that telescope there that has a laser attached is controlled by a computer, which has logs of the movement. And I don't know if those logs are public record. If it is publicly funded, then you might be able to file a FOIA request for very specific logs of the position of the telescope. And it's very specific computer logs. They probably wouldn't deny it. They'd probably find it to be curious and find out where it's pointed at for that day.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah, good idea.
I'd be curious. And what's interesting is like, it's probably not too common knowledge, but it was a big deal on Maui, like maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe a little more, is that they flew in scientists from around the world to replace the lens in the telescope just recently. And they said it was a couple decade project. They haven't done it in a long time. And they needed to fly in all these specialists to work on it. And it was a super big deal. And they conveniently just did that as well. So, it all kind of is one of those things.
Does anybody know? So who runs that facility there? Does anybody know?
It's an Air Force facility. If you click the link I put in the chat, Mike, you could probably share it on the screen if you wanted to.
Yeah, and there's a link to that.
Couple of pages.
Anybody
Air
that's
Force,
watching,
Space
there's a link to that document in the Last American Vagabond Substack from like the 15th. There's a link to that document too, and there's an article talking about the guy who used to run it in the Los Alamos Daily News or whatever. And he went on to go. I can't remember where he went on to, but yeah, so it talks about like the history of that particular site and their development of, these types of weapons. So trying to find it here. I thought I just had
I'll
it.
see if I can bring it up on the screen here. I will. It just everything will go black for a second until I select it. I mean, I'm just wondering because I didn't know that there was a laser right there next to the telescope, and to point that telescope yourself, like, hey, you're an evil doer, as George Bush would say, you're an evil doer, and you point that thing at the ground there. You wouldn't want to be on the logs to do that. It would look bad, and it would be traced back to you. But if there's a spy in there, like you send in a spy team with an excuse to do something, like to change out a lens, at that point in time, you write your script, you put the script in the computer, and on date 8/8, you change the coordinates of the telescope to point it at the ground or wherever and start it up. I'm just, I don't want to accuse people of changing out lenses of being spies and saboteurs, but that's what I'm doing.
I will.
That's
I
what I'm
will.
doing.
I think they are. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and then also the comments that of the mayor, right? That he, it seemed like he now just wants to buy the. I mean, obviously he's selling it as like, oh, I'm gonna help everybody out by taking control of this land. But
the governor.
That's what I meant. Yeah. So, okay, can somebody expand on that and what was said, and then what intentions we think, the real intentions on why he wants to take over the land?
I mean, we played the clip on the show, and it sounds a lot like Joe Biden saying, they're all our children, they're not your children. It sounds a lot like the way that the effective altruism people talk about regular human beings. It seems like it's more of the exact same rhetoric, where the underlying implication is not all biology belongs to the state, and we're here to lease some of your identity back to you. We're allowing our defense contractor buddy Elon Musk to lease some of your identity back to you. If you went and got the blue check, I don't know if you guys know this or not, it happened to my friend Garland Nixon. If you're paying for the blue check, what you're doing is engaging in a contract with Elon Musk and Twitter, or X, sorry, that says you now retain ownership of my identity, and you are going to lease my identity back to me for $8 or $11 a month, because Garland has been locked out of his account. He can't access it. It's still up. All of his media has been removed. All of his shows, all of the links, all of that stuff. It's all gone, but the blue check and Garland are still there. Twitter told him, again, blue check is there, verification, right? He did the Elon verification and all that. They're telling him, we don't know who you are. We can't verify you. Yes, we sent this email to the same email address that we've sent the congratulations, you've been verified, and the invoices and every other email that we've had to send you over the last 14 years you've had the account. Sure, that happened, and sure, we can check and verify that the IP addresses and the devices that have been used to log in have been the same throughout. Sure, but you are a dissident, and you say bad things about Secretary of State Andy Blinken and a number of other people. So now we have decided that you don't have access to your identity. and until we determine that you can raise your social credit, or until we determine that you can do right by us, well, you know what? You're not you. And if we had the wallet set up now, if he was allowed to be monetized now, if we had all of the things that Elon Musk has said he wants to do with X and make it WeChat, he would effectively be erased from society at this moment, because, again, he got into a contract with X, and now his identity belongs to them, and they lease it back to him via that mark.
Well, I'm not. I mean, nobody should be surprised that that's what they do. I am surprised I didn't get the memo that it's Hat Day today, because the majority of people are wearing hats today. I
noticed that. I noticed that. I wanted to say something in regards to what you just said, Steve. That's a Black Mirror episode. Hi, everyone, by the way.
Hey, Mary.
Joan is awful. Have any of you seen that Black Mirror episode? So basically it's she sees that there's a new show on like Netflix, and it's Selma Hayek playing this woman Joan, and Joan is watching it, and her life, the activities of the day are being broadcast in this series, and her life, and then even goes to Selma Hayek and tries to like intercept to try to get her identity back. But basically she's licensed her life and there's nothing she can do. Yeah, it's a good episode. It's hella scary.
Well, it's good because so the beginning of the episode, or at the end of that episode, she's watching this new series on Netflix, and you're trying to figure out like how is she watching her daily activities, when she's, it just happened that morning, and it shows all the little rude things she said and all this stuff, and it obviously paints not a very good light of who she is. And she's like, how is this happening? And I'm like thinking, okay, this is Black Mirror, something super futuristic, something that I can't comprehend. And then boom, the giveaway is like, yeah, like what was it? Was it her tablet, her phone, something that was just basically recording everything? It was just like all the terms and services that we don't read and agree to. And they have the right to turn on the camera, the microphone, and they're just recording and watching and listening to everything and taking your life and making a show out of it. And she didn't realize that when she agreed to this, that they could do that, and I'm thinking to myself, like, just like most Black Mirror episodes, you're like, that's kind of what's going on. Like most of us are giving away all our information and all, our privacy and all those things without ever really stopping and thinking about how we have given away our identities and who we are, and every picture of your family and your friends and piece of privacy is all gone, and there's a great video that you can find still on YouTube. I've talked about it quite a bit, called Free is a Lie. And Free is a Lie, in one of the parts in the video, he talks about how, like, for some reason we have this disconnect when we lose our privacy online. Like if somebody went to your mailbox and took your mail and photocopied it and then put it back in your mailbox and just said, hey, you know what? I'm just taking a copy. I'm giving it back. You're good. I'm just going to take a quick copy of it, keep a record of it, but it's your mail. Don't worry about it. We'd be pissed. We'd be like, you're that's going too far. But yet that's exactly what happens online. People are copying and recording and keeping records of everything we do. And yet, for some reason, that's more acceptable. So,
it might understand. I have to listen to the Black Mirror thing. Are we to believe that they're turning Maui into a Black Mirror theme park?
It probably.
You never know.
It seems like it is right now. But just this whole attitude. I mean, whether we're talking like these like super powerful elites outside of the government or the government themselves, like they have a history of like imperialism and just conquest, and it's like we take what we want and screw you, basically. And so the people on the ground that are affected by this, I've heard lots of rumblings of people are being very vigilant out in Maui, and they're like, we're going to stand up to any sort of attempt to either seize the land, buy the land, whether it's the state. Can you speak to that a little bit, Shelby? Like what's the attitude of the people standing up against whatever's coming to seize that land or take that land, whether it's like BlackRock or the state or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I mean, just like any other intended attack, you start lining up the details behind the scenes. And in January, right on the west side of Maui at the Hyatt, they had held the conference essentially about AI technology, smart city. Josh Green is a WEF puppet. 3 weeks ago, he's in the UN talking about how Hawaii is ushering in the smart city. One peculiar thing about Lahaina and Front Street is that this, oceanfront land, one, it's worth billions of dollars, but also it was held by generational Native Hawaiians who, had this passed down for a long time. These buildings are over 200 years old. They're protected under historical laws. So you weren't actually able to even renovate these buildings or work on them because you weren't allowed to. And you're never actually allowed to build this close to the ocean again, like plumbing and, situations like this. So what happens now that these buildings are not under historical law? then, you can take it like another step further. It's like 3 weeks ago, Josh Green had signed some sort of paperwork essentially eliminating the Sunshine Law. So he doesn't have to disclose any of the public development plans that are going on in Lahaina. What I foresee happening is that right now they have it fenced off because the FEMA is going, and the EPA. The EPA said they're going in and spraying a non-toxic chemical on the burn zone because they don't want ash to go into the ocean. So they're going to seal it. Cool. That sounds really sus. But FEMA is going to go through and they're going to say all this land is uninhabitable. And then what happens? The 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment give the state of Hawaii the right to claim and seize the land, as long as they use it, 1, for public development, or 2, something for the people, aka a memorial, just like they did with 9/11. And governor's already talked about making a memoriam for the people. He loves the smart city. People are already having their insurance claims denied for their homes.
So that's happening? That's happening already? Wow.
That is happening because they're saying that their homes weren't within city code. So, how could you have insurance if you weren't in code to begin with? So it's like, ugh. I don't want to say that's what it is, but it's entirely what it is. He's trying to steal the land, and he's kind of essentially given himself all the right to do so. So unless we all figure it out.
Yeah, but what is he really getting out of it? Unless he's getting paid on the back end, he's just a public servant. So he's got to have a deal on the back end somewhere. When he leaves, he's taking
globalist, Satanist, fucking one of those guys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is what he said in an interview. We will set an example for the world on how we protect and preserve our culture, our history, and our values as we navigate the challenges of sustainable development, extreme weather, and global climate change in this century. So he's Team World Economic Forum. When you're using terms like sustainable development, you're in the United Nations lingo. You're part of that group. I don't know, but maybe if we dug into him, we'd find he was a young global leader. I don't know.
He just passed something.
What a fucking surprise.
Yeah.
I'm
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm reading this article. Governor's Housing Working Group meets for the first time Friday, August 11th for this Build Beyond Barriers working group, where they're trying to create affordable housing that is exempt from environmental regulations. And it totally goes in line with stuff like tiny houses, 15-minute cities. And that was, it's not sus that the first meeting was August 11th and he had just passed this law or started this initiative 1 month ago.
So I want to add something. I want to add something to that. So instead of build back better, it's what? Build better barriers?
build beyond barriers.
It's actually
beyond barriers. Yeah.
I just
Burn
want to
back
add
better
to what Shelby said. So basically, last month, the Hawaiian government passed a law that the Lahaina, historical area could not be redistricted for any more development of hotels unless a natural disaster occurred. So what are the odds? And I want to say, as far as ripping, stripping, raping, getting rid of historical buildings, we're seeing that all over the country. This ugly, I've created a word, uglification. Like, it's like, look at all the beautiful buildings, like in LA alone, that is like all Home Depot shit now. It's just all ugly, ugly, ugly. So I feel like that is part of the agenda too, right? To strip the history and
personality.
Yeah, all of it.
And identity. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, and we're going in that direction. I feel like before COVID, you were seeing this, the popularity of little mom and pop places, coffee shops are popping up everywhere. And then COVID came around and it just put an end to that. You gave all the money to the big, box stores, all the business to big box stores, just completely demolished small businesses. And this is just another step in that direction where, like, before, if you traveled, each place, even in the US, like each state, each town had like their own identity, their own little coffee shops or restaurants or local places. And now regardless where you travel all over the world. It's like there's a Dunkin' Donuts, there's a Starbucks, there's a McDonald's, there's a whatever, and it's like every place is going to look the same. They're not going to have an identity. So it just seems like these are all baby steps in that direction. That's the thing about a lot of these events, like the wildfires or whatnot. Like, people just look at that one event, and then when you start talking about the bigger picture, they struggle to kind of accept that or digest the fact that that could be what's happening. And it's because it's always little small steps in that direction. And many of us, we're constantly kind of zooming out, and it's like, okay, what's the purpose? What's the agenda? What could they gain from this? And many people can't do that, and that's why they struggle. But if we don't talk about it in the process, by the time we get to that end point, it's too late. COVID was the same thing. It's like, oh, well, what's the big deal if we just stay home for 2 weeks? Or what's the big deal if we just wear a mask? And then next thing you know, the whole world turned upside down. So, I think this is definitely could be, if it was intentional, it definitely was for one of these many other agendas we're talking about, a smart city or, whatever it may be. I mean, they've been trying to implement that for a while. And a lot of people hear this term smart city. I mean, that's literally going to be the end of your privacy. I mean, that they're just going to have cameras everywhere, microphones everywhere. I mean, it's just going to be the end of privacy as we know it. So, I mean, it's wild.
It was during that COVID stuff that I was looking at like places to buy. I thought if I wanted to move, I was renting, and I just, it was freaky in LA. And I thought about Maui because I love Maui, of course. It's like, to me, ridiculously expensive. I could never, ever do it. But I know there were people who lived there who were from there. But when I was looking into it, I specifically was looking to see if like Gavin Newsom and people like that owned basically all of Hawaii, and a lot of them do. And two of the big things about that, one is it's like this, it's a great place where East and West can meet, like both the Asian world and the US could access that and put big money there. Like all the richest people in the world are going to want to be there. Also, it's the remotest, if I remember this correctly, it's the remotest land on Earth. So it's further from other land than any other piece of land, which makes it really invaluable from a military point of view.
Well, okay, so I'm really glad that you said that because, if you look into the history of Hawaii, we know that this is an annexed territory. Hawaii's never went through the proper channels of being a state. It was illegally stolen by the Queen of Hawaii. And then, we've also had essentially an illegal U.S. military occupation that has declared it a state. Roosevelt was the one who signed these military leases for the United States, and they're coming up on the end of the expiration of these leases. What does that mean? Is this the end of the U.S. occupation? Is this actually a war crime on Hawaii and the Kingdom of Hawaii? And then you could take it like a next step. Are we going to war with China really soon? And we need to make sure that we have more military bases set up in the middle of the ocean, because you're right, Monica, we are the most isolated piece of land in the whole world. We're 2,000 miles in any direction from any landmass. And we're closest to, we are the center point before you get to Asia, if you're going to be coming this direction. So yeah, could it be for a military reason? I absolutely could think that as well. The smart city might be just a total fucking facade. It could be for more military occupation. I mean, they blew up the Lahaina harbor. Why wouldn't that's the perfect military harbor, just like Pearl Harbor over on Oahu? I don't know. But what I'm most sick about is there's so many children that are missing, and the media is not talking about it, you guys, and they're acting like it's not fucking happened. But I'm telling you, there was 3,000 registered children in the West Maui area that could have been in the fire zone. Only about 1,000 of them have re-registered in school. Where are they? And where are the parents? Where are the vigils? Where are the pictures of the children? Where the fuck is any of
Yes.
that?
There's no victim profiles. Normally, day one on any of these mass tragedies, you are just inundated by the best artists, the nicest grandma. Like there's always
those are not real. this is real.
Well, I know, that's how I know this
Yeah.
is real. That's what I was like, oh, this is way worse than
Don't
anything
tell
we-
me there's
we see
not
on the
a
front
missing
page.
white baby though. There's a missing white girl. And that usually that'll get the media's attention for a solid 8 months if you find if there's like a just
I think-
adorable little white kid.
I think they could have been
Or
trafficked.
1,000 Hawaii.
Yeah. Shelby, what's the group that you said they have to re-register into?
So there was about 3,000 students in the West Maui area, and only about 1,000 or 1,200 of them have re-registered since then.
But
And
registration would have been before that day, right? Wasn't it the first day of actual school attendance? Can we?
Well, so they sent
see when that happened?
The kids didn't go to school because they sent them home that morning.
Why?
Because of the wind.
Oh.
So the kids were home in their houses alone without their parents because parents still had to go to work. There was no alarms. They didn't know anything was going on. There was giant military submarines spotted off the coast of the Lahaina Harbor the morning of. I've got pictures of them. We've seen them with our own eyes, not just a fucking conspiracy. Black, giant military submarines sitting out there just waiting. Like, but then it's like, where are the parents? Like I'm a mom. Where's the hundreds of parents? This is my child. This is my child. This is my child. Were the parents killed as well? Right. There is something that is wrong. They are lying about the death count. I know it. 100.
Yeah, what
100%.
Isn't it more like 1,000 at least?
It's probably 5,000 or 10,000 people. There's so many old people that actually only had the names auntie and uncle for generations now because no one knew their traditional Japanese or Hawaiian name. And, it was like, oh, auntie who lives on this street. Those are going to go also into an invisible count. They're never going to account for those bodies because why would they? They're basically, if they're not put on a missing list, they're not going to say that they've found them. And then the governor already said that they were going to essentially not find remains. So we have all these missing children. The governor says, we're not going to find their remains anyways. And people are going to believe that? That is fucking bullshit.
And also the Hawaiian people aren't going to accept with their rituals and traditions to not bury their dead, right?
I love the Hawaiian culture and the people. I feel devastated for the amount of travesty that's been put upon them since the beginning of colonization, except like in this particular moment, they're also kind of waiting for government assistance at the same time. Like they're kind of like waiting for help for the people that they hate at the same time. So there's still kind of like an internal conflict of interest, I believe. People are like, for them to have to come to grips and say the government murdered our children and let them burn alive in our homes, that would actually be a civil war. That would be a revolt. And they know that. And that's why they're fucking trying to cover it up as deep as they can, because if people knew what actually happened. And so I do believe that there's a large cognitive dissonance. There's a lot of denial right now. Understandably, these people are in fight or flight right now. They are living in a trauma state because of what they just went through, and they don't even actually have like the cognizance or the wherewithal to even unpack what's happening to them. And so, from me 30 miles away, I guess I'm thankful that, my family is safe, but I'm also looking at it from a different perspective than they are, because I'm able to see it a little differently than them in this trauma state. And I'm thinking, this is fucked up, but I think that they might be too, they're not able to see that right now,
Didn't that police chief from Vegas say that the bodies were like crunching under his feet? Like what the, how is that a professional?
Well, the police chief also is ordained himself the coroner as of January. Are you kidding me? And he's the same police chief as the Las Vegas shootings.
Yeah. Incident commander, but that makes him even more directly responsible than the chief, because if he's the incident commander, then he's the person who's there responsible, as opposed to the chief, who's largely a political appointee.
It's insane.
How did he become coroner?
He appointed himself. They changed the laws in January. You can go and look it up. They changed Like, isn't that such a conflict of interest? Are you kidding
So,
me?
okay, but here's this is an important distinction.
I
If
don't
he's
know.
not the medical examiner, it doesn't really matter because you can go after the medical examiner. The coroner's job is to kick the body when you come up to the body. And if the body doesn't kick back, he goes, okay, send it to the ME.
Are you sure the
Usually.
coroner doesn't label the cause of death?
That's the medical examiner. Now, sometimes the medical examiner can also be the coroner, and that's when it gets really shady. But unless and that's not to say that the medical examiner isn't completely on the take and won't sign, but hundreds did during COVID, signed off on absolutely whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not, but yeah, that
They're
is a
not
distinction.
medical professionals. They're elected officials, the coroner. I did not know that. Steve, you
Yep.
are a
As
wealth
long
of information.
as long as the body doesn't kick back, they can say, all right, chuck it over to the ME. Yeah.
Well, that was integral during the Rona regime. They changed the way we bury people, and in other parts of the country, they allowed for the signing off. Usually, there's supposed to be more than one person to sign off on the cause of death, and they changed that purposely. Obviously,
that's convenient.
There was supposed to be a new validated list of 388 missing persons from yesterday. I read in the
And they said there's no minors on it. They said there's no children or minors on that list. Like, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm just like blown away that anybody is buying this. We had that reporter, Nick Sorter from Kentucky, I believe. He came over and he yelled at the mayor. I was like, thank you. Somebody is saying it. And I reached out to him. He said he was getting death threats. I had a van parked across the street from my house the morning that Biden was here. It was really weird. And I live in the middle of nowhere. It was like 4:30 in the morning and there's this white SUV. So, I mean, I don't know, but
You DoorDash it donuts.
Yeah.
Is there any myths of tunnels and underground?
Oh, it's not a myth.
infrastructure there?
There's a lot of tunnels because we have a lot of lava tubes under the island that are natural occurrences. And then the Maui water system, they have since taken control of all of these lava tubes and underground systems. So there is a massive amount of tunnel systems under Hawaii. As far as like West Maui goes, like I'm hearing a lot of people that were saying that they saw police. So they just recently built a bypass area. So West Maui is completely separated from East Maui. There's only one way in and one way out, and there's a giant mountain range and a sea cliff on either side. So it's hard to get there. And for years, what they've wanted to do is what they did in Oahu is that they cut through the mountain range over there so they could make it more accessible to get to other sides of the island. They don't want to do that on Maui. They've tried to stop that from happening because they would cut through Iao Valley, which is our most sacred valley. But it would take 15 minutes to get from Kahului to the west side instead of an hour and a half. So it would be a huge savings, right? Well, some people are saying that they were seeing cops going up to the mountain and never coming back down. They were going towards this dead end road and they never came back. Because like they have tunnels up there that were connecting them. I mean, they might as well. Why wouldn't they? If they are the ones all in control. Maybe that's where they brought the children. Maybe the submarines are just a hoax. I mean, I don't know. But
the kids thing, I just want to clarify because I've heard this thing a few times and I just want to try to grasp what happened. So the kids were back to school. They went to school. The parents dropped them off.
It was the first day of school.
So, yeah, okay. Yeah. So it was the first day of school. Parents dropped
canceled.
them off. Well, were the parents still there and they told them to go home, or did the parents leave? Because this is what I'm trying to figure out. Like, did the parents actually leave and in some way they brought these kids back home without the parents knowing, and something like that?
The kids from my knowledge, the kids stayed home because school was closed completely because the power was out and the lines and the high wind advisory. It was like by 7 a.m. that morning. So they decided to keep the kids home entirely from school.
Oh,
so they were
for the day.
Home for the day.
Okay, because I was like curious. I'm like, are they so evil that they let the kids go on the bus to school.
Right.
Parents went to work, then put them back on the bus, sent them home, and didn't tell the parents. That's what I was like trying to process. I'm like,
that's what I thought too.
Might not
It
have had
sounded like that.
coverage. I think the idea was that the parents didn't have coverage because the kids were supposed to be in school rather than the day before when they knew they weren't going to be in school.
Okay. Yeah.
They knew they weren't at school. They left them home. In Maui, we lose cell coverage occasionally. When there is like natural disaster, like or storm or whatever, we lose cell coverage, and so it's not totally out of the norm. But so parents still went to work, at the resorts, at the restaurants, at the stores. So it's like, they were doing their thing anyways. And so I was like, okay, well, you can stay home with your brothers and sisters. Hey, one more day of summer, cool. And so there's just neighborhoods full of children, that are gone.
Now,
and the more neighborhoody, the more likely you would just let it slide and let the kids stay home. What's going to happen?
Right. And in Maui, we don't worry about things like, fucking everybody leaves their door unlocked. It's like, there's not crime and people aren't robbing, it's like, there's not. What's that?
Speaking of doors, something that Sam mentioned on a recent podcast he did, which I didn't see the pictures, but apparently I don't know if anybody else saw the pictures of, there's a lot of like cars with like just their doors were closed. Like it didn't seem like anybody was in a panic, like houses with their doors were closed. Like nothing was wide open. Like, holy crap, we're all going to die. Let's let's just run and let's get out of here. And then you would think if people were doing that, you wouldn't be so concerned about like closing the door on the house that's about to burn down. Or
people panic weird though, man. I had to evacuate in 2020 in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I was live on the air when the text came in saying, hey, you've got to evacuate, there's a fire, within a couple of miles of where you live, hit the road. And I can't tell you how many houses we drove by that were perfectly shut up. Some of them had lights on, like they were expecting to come back, kind of that kind of thing. Like you don't necessarily want to, even when you're in a state of panic like that. There's a lot of things that go through your mind, like, I bet the tweakers are going to stick around and try and rob every single house that they can find. And so, making sure that you leave when you're fleeing your property, that it's, baseline secure is kind of one of those things that is part of your panic in an emergency, or at least in my particular instance.
But it sounds like you got notified. Like the way I'm understanding this, it sounds like a lot of these people got notified when there's a fire, like, right next door.
It was only when they heard screaming outside that it was like, oh, it's time to go. But like the people in the bodies that they find in cars that are burned, that's where I wonder about the EMP thing. Like, why couldn't you get out of your car? Why were you stuck in there?
Or maybe,
like if you
our fears of like, modern day cars with all the chips and everything,
right.
But they could just disable the car remotely,
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
and the
why
other
not?
thing is, depending on how hot the road is or how hot the ambient temperature is, that kind of shit goes first. Whenever it's always the delicate stuff that tends to crap out on you immediately, or the stuff that, maybe not electrically with heat shields and wires and shit like that. However, just relative temperature can really fuck up the inner workings of a car. It does it all the time.
Shelby, another thing that I know that you can speak on that kind of goes along with the people being trapped in their cars. I know your mom had a personal experience with this, and there's lots of reports of this, but it's the fact that the initial people trying to flee Lahaina, there was actual roadblocks, people being prevented from leaving. And, it also goes along with the initial reports that the fires were contained. That was the message that was being spread, was that the fires were contained. And so there wasn't like as much panic to get people out. But the whole idea of them keeping people in the city, what's up with that? That's so crazy.
Yeah, they were so like, is this coincidence or grand design? There happens to be a power line down on every exit. There was a police barricade on every exit. why? Wow, it's so weird. And so she had said, my mom still worked in Lahaina. So she's been working there for 10 years, solid. And
shout out to unjected grandma.
Unjected grandma who barely escaped. But so she had said, like, when she first left work, she had pulled out and there was a downed power line and like cones on the road, and they were working on a situation. So she turned around into Front Street, came back around, and that's when the police were barricading off the highway there. And it was like they were doing a fucking parade. Oh, go this way and then go this way, and then it's fine, go that way. And even though like there was times where the highway was clear, they were still blocking it off. There wasn't panic. They weren't displaying that everybody should be evacuating. Like they were telling like, just evacuate by car, but it was like by grid, everybody was gridlocked because they blocked off half the exits. And she had said that she had tried to get the attention of one officer, and that basically he was like non-respondent. Like she was waving at him like, sir, like, hello, can I ask you a question? And he wouldn't even look at her. And like almost like a hypnosis kind of thing going on. And a lot of them were just like, oh, we're just following orders, we're just following orders, we're just following orders. I mean, of course, being unjected, always going to take it to the next level. Like, is that why they mandated the vaccine for every police and first responder? We know that nanotechnology can modify behavior remotely. This is like DARPA fucking research. Were they acting out of character because they literally were,
Or were they actually local police? Were they an outside force brought in to dress up as local police? I mean, if they truly were local police and part of the community, I suspect that they may have an idea of what they are a part of, and that they will have PTSD and or suicidal thoughts very soon after. If they're not a pro, like not a mercenary dealing with this kind of stuff.
So a lot of interesting stuff happened after Pelletier came on the Maui scene. Like, I know that it was like some of the previous upper police guys, they all quit when he became in charge because they said it was such an abusive work environment. And then the secretary of like 35 years was in a car crash from a purse thief in the middle of the night, like down the road from my house, and she was killed in this weird car crash. And she was the only other person that knew like about all of the inner workings and all of the deepest things, was this secretary woman. So I think that they murdered her. And it seems like,
when was that, Shelby? Was that before or after?
Earlier this year.
When was he installed? This
last year. I want to say last year. I could be wrong, but I think it's last year. And then like I mean, people are. I would imagine that it's a pretty brainwashing environment. Stockholm syndrome. Like loving your abuser kind of thing. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
MK Ultra for all we know, right? Like they did install like a bunch of like shiny 5G towers all over Lahaina, and none of those burned down. That was convenient.
December 2021, just FYI.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Monica. Shelby, certainly, are you and your mom the only ones that are awake? Like, what's the vibe? And are there other active unjected people whose brains? Because I will admit that I get on the phone now, customer service, and I'll say like, oh, do you have brain damage because of the vaccine? And sometimes
literally
they don't even respond to me.
Like, you sound vaccinated.
You sound so vaccinated. Wow, I have to use that one. Wow. So I'm just curious, there must be others like you, are there?
I think if not, this woke them up.
Yeah, well, definitely Hawaii is going under a red pill moment right now in the most brutal way, because they fucking loved Josh Green. They loved the vaccine agenda. They all lined up like, oh, give us the needle. No, they fell for it so hard. I want to say like 85% is vaccinated down here, and the like swimming in the ocean with masks on and stuff. They love to listen to the government. And so they voted in Josh Green, and they were like so stoked on that. And now they're all kind of like scratching their heads and they're like, wait a second. Like they're like, I'm like watching people becoming red pilled, and I'm like, ooh, it's gonna be even worse when you realize like how deep this goes. But it's still, the climate is like, it's very, I want to say it's a little 50-50. Like some people are like me and Unjected Grandma, where we're like, this is definitely, what it looks like. In our opinion. But other people, it's hard to want to believe that your government is completely out to murder you and your children. So it's a lot easier to believe that it's power lines. And I get it. Ignorance is bliss.
Oh yeah.
Even there could be some nefarious stuff with the power lines themselves,
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Maybe they were half sawed at the bottom.
Yeah, or intentionally not, doing the proper maintenance to, keep
Right.
the brush like away from the power lines,
Well, I just read today that in Zero Hedge that the power line company got sued by the government, and now the power line company is saying, hey, listen, this isn't our problem. Like we shut them off 6 hours before this second fire. We shut it off for the first fire and we kept it shut off. So you trying to pin this second flare up after everyone was told to go home, like, oh, you get the all clear. They said, we never turned the power back on. You're trying to pin the second one on us,
right?
And call us out. And he's saying that was a different location. And
right.
we
They
shut
said
it off and never turned it back on. So like, get the fuck out of here with that.
Wow.
We look forward to the investigation, is what they said, I think, this morning. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I don't blame them. But
nobody looks forward to an investigation if they're guilty.
If it was a smart city, wouldn't you sue? Wouldn't the first thing you would do is you would take out the electric company? Maybe they're going to sue the fuck out of the electric company so it goes out of business.
Because that's what happened in California. Is that they were taking down the electric company for doing that, and it was clear for two reasons. I think one is they want to be able to preemptively black people out all the time, like just have a rotating blackout to send us back to the dark ages, but also to fundamentally transform our power infrastructure.
Yes, like they're using them as the fall guys.
I mean, Bill Gates said that they were going to redo the power grid. I mean, it's.
Oh, great! Look at South Africa; they're doing a fantastic job there.
Well, I mean, another really good question is, what really luxurious thing did you buy with that huge $700 check you got?
Yeah, no
kidding. I don't know what they could have gotten. I mean, literally, you can't even go to the grocery store for that. Hi, Scott.
Hi, guys. I gotta go. Take it easy.
Bye. Aren't the people
Take care,
saying
Scott.
you sent all this money to Ukraine, and how about us? And what is really going to happen to the people whose homes aren't covered by insurance? And by the way, it's not only in Maui, in Hawaii, throughout the country, there are all these crazy storms, whether it's California. Like, I keep on thinking we're gutting middle America. And I bet if you drive through, it's 10 cities. And where are these people going? Are the FEMA camps already in operation?
They are. They're setting them up right in town. They've got the little box. They just sent them in from somewhere. They brought them in on a military plane. They're 50 by 50 boxes, and they've already been setting up hundreds down the road, and it's really spooky. And I think that they're going to use that as the excuse for our COVID hotspot. And like the first outbreak is going to be there when they try to like redo their COVID shit. I already can see it. But yes, they've already been bringing in the camps. I mean,
and they're seeding the tiny home thing that way too.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Which the tiny homes, if you've read about them, they have I think who was talking about this, Allison McDowell, is that her name? That she was saying like they have monitors of how much you go to the bathroom and stuff. Like that is how high tech these little tiny homes are, and it's like the ultimate control device. But yes, God.
Are they smart? Are they smart tiny homes?
I don't know about those, but they want that.
These.
They want
these
that.
are like literally metal boxes with like a window that's like this big. It looks like a concentration camp. And I mean, yeah, that $700 is not going to buy you anything. And then what was going to happen is what FEMA declares your land uninhabitable. So FEMA is going to give you a shiny offer, or the state of Hawaii is going to say, oh, we're so sorry. Here's your pay out for your uninhabitable land. And they've already done that before, where it's uninhabitable for like until they clean it up and they put a resort on it, and then it's inhabitable again. So
this is how railroad barons.
So
this is how railroad
gross.
barons did homesteaders.
Disaster capitalism.
1800. Yeah, I mean, this is a tried and true method of land grab. Did you guys see where the Amos Institute, the Air Force thing, is having a conference in a couple of weeks?
No.
Wait, okay.
We should go.
The Advanced Maui Optical Space Surveillance Technologies Amos Conference, September 19th through 22nd, 2023, is the premier technical conference in the nation devoted to space situational awareness, space domain awareness. The cross-section of private sector and government and academic participation, that nice public-private partnership, helps foster important dialogue and international collaboration. Yeah, and they're saying on their website, they're like, hey, don't worry, it's just Lahaina that's closed. We're still doing the conference. You can still shop around. You can grab yourself a scone. It'll work. Don't think that you can't come here and check out direct energy weapons.
If you can black out Hawaii, you would have no light pollution because of its remoteness.
That's true. We would have so many stars. But, maybe this is what they're prepping for Project Bluebeam. I mean, the observatory, it's a laser, but it's a perfect projector screen. Hello. It'll be able to do the best Bluebeam shows. Maybe they'll just destroy the rest
with
of
the blackout.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like the blackout would allow you to access space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Telescopes and stuff. I'm just saying they use the infrastructure thing to black it out, and then they put the space thing there.
I agree.
It's just they're always multitasking, which I was reading in the report from Iron Mountain. They never do a really huge operation without like a bunch of things.
They have.
And another thing that I've noticed is when they're doing these psyops lately, I have a hashtag like another perfect storm. Instead of just there's this huge event and like 2 buildings fell down. They're like, wow, like 15 things happen at once. And so like, obviously we have enough fail safes for any one thing, but like when a bunch of little things happen. So anytime there's major system failures or multiple system failures at the same time that there are multiple events, like multiple fires, no alarms going off, the hydrants don't have water in them.
Right.
Like any multiple like that is that's a huge tell to me.
Are there GoFundMe campaigns? Because that's also a tell of bullshit.
Fakeness. I haven't seen any of that.
Right?
There's the celebrity who is Jason Momoa guy. And then there's a few other celebrities that are doing something called Act Blue Fund.
Big money laundering.
Something. And then of course there's lots of churches that are raising money, but then it's we don't really know where's that going.
But it's not like a We Are the World thing. So
yeah.
Well, Act Blue is the DNC money laundering.
Yeah. That's what they're
donation.
using. Yeah. So I would say super sus.
Speaking of blue, did you guys cover the blue thing that everybody's talking about already?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the blue thing?
Well, just the blue. The blue's not getting burned, and Did anyone see that? I think Sasha Latipova had a post today, actually, a Substack today about one of her contributors describes the evidence from the GIS system, the Geographical Information System. So we went through this and looked at all the detail, and it seems like he can see. I'll just read a quote from it. What he found was interesting in the surrounding undeveloped land with extensive fire damage and parcels owned by Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Housing Finance and DevCorp, which both appear to be the same and fall under Hawaii's HUD authority. It appears to own property running south from the Civic Center down to Lahaina Bypass. Everything west of HUD owned parcels are hundreds of small residential lots, which were all destroyed. So it looks like he's showing that there's this real precise delineation between what was burned and how it's zoned.
It is. It's of course, it's kind of like what it looks like in Paradise, where it's just cut around little areas and stuff. But yeah, it's not all of them, but a lot of the beachfront homes were magically spared, owned by, Canadian landowners. All of the gorgeous mansions that are up on the hillside were spared. And it's kind of like those homes. So like I'd mentioned with the historical acts, you could never rebuild those specific beachfront homes again because they're too close to the water. So it's kind of ironic that they were spared. But yeah, of course, the middle class, the working class, the homes that have been passed down for generation to generation, like those are the ones that were destroyed by the thousands.
Do you think that maybe raising awareness on the bullshit of climate change, meaning like the fact that there's man-made, like would that help? Like most of these cataclysms now in America, I'm like, oh, another fake hurricane, another fake storm. How much do you think the population is waking up to that aspect? Do you think there is any awareness being raised about that this is man-made climate change?
I mean, they're going to have to admit it because China does it openly.
Right. Really? What do you mean?
Oh, yeah. India gets mad at China for stealing its rain. So, I mean, they have I read a CNN article a few years ago, China just launches 900 weather drones. So, we're conspiracy theories because we're not allowed to talk about it yet. And then when it comes to us, we will be allowed to talk about it, but we'll be crazy thinking it happened before it was announced. But whatever.
Is there an acceptance of geoengineering? I mean, Mexico's president supposedly stopped the chemtrails because there was a company in Baja called Make Sunsets, and he was like, "Fuck that!" And that's.
I wish, but I think that people aren't ready for that conversation. It's hard to want to admit, wow, they're spraying stuff from the sky. Like people just are in denial, I think, just really about everything. It's it's hard to want to believe these things. And so they're like, you're just a conspiracy theorist. And well, you can just dig deeper and find out for yourself that it's all true. But yeah, you're going to look at the world a whole lot different. And then it's not going to be as fun anymore. I'm sorry. But, I see it come over my house. There's one that they do. And it's it looks like a fucking rocket launch, and it goes over the hill, and it's one perfect, and then it disperses everywhere. And I mean, I don't think that they're ready I don't know. Maybe they will one day. I hope.
Maybe I was being hopeful. When I
hope.
When I get
well, here's another thing. Yeah, God.
Sorry. I was just going to say one thing that I've heard recently is I get into Ubers and I'll say, wow, those fragrances, they're toxic. They cause cancer. And the answers that I get is everything causes cancer. Okay.
I hate that answer.
Black pill.
Sorry, go ahead, Monica.
So all I was going to say is there's some people are talking, a few of my tweets are mentioning this theory, and it's a second order effect where people who disobeyed the barriers survived, right? That's what we're hearing. And I'm thinking that we're getting to where they're weaponizing conspiracy theorists, maybe the way the Hungarian Revolution, they were everybody who's afraid, everybody who wants to fight back, show yourself and we will help you. And then we didn't help them, and they revealed themselves to the communists, and we were all slaughtered. So I'm just wondering if there are they actually are cultivating even just resistance. I'm always baffled by the fact that the unvaccinated people would have an advantage. That thing just still, I can't really crack the code, but this reminds me of that.
I would wish, I would hope.
Is it a setup and that you're getting corralled? They're well, they don't have the numbers, right? They have 35% of the numbers. So if there is a war and they put their colors on because they think they can win, we'll be able to just mow them down. That's a little black pilled, but I'm just saying it's one of many possibilities. I'm just speculating.
Wasn't it only 8% that won the Revolutionary War or something? It was a very small percent of the population that actually fought against the British.
The irate minority, yes.
Most people were completely complacent, didn't give one shit.
I was going to say,
yeah,
maybe we should look at the Czechoslovakian Velvet Revolution and what they did in terms of forming an immediate counter economy and a number of parallel structures. And that's what got them to eventually break the backs of the communists there, because they went after them in the only manner of attack or terrorism or direct war or kinetic war that you can think of, which is economic. And they said, we're not going to use your fucking money anymore.
Ricky, we have to do the parallel systems union of the unwanted.
Yes.
Maybe Steve can.
We'll get
can
Parallel
name
Mike
names.
from Europe.
Definitely Parallel Mike. He's my fave, but you also have Broze and Bush, and I'm sure Steve knows people.
That's a good
idea.
For sure.
I'm all for it.
Last but not least is this clip from James Corbett with his Solutions Watch episode on the White Rose. Hope to see you all next week.
Kenny, Etienne, tell us about White Rose.
All right. Well, I guess first we'll start really briefly with the historical White Rose. The White Rose in World War II being the anti-Nazi propagandists, giving out brochures, just spreading information, and started by Sophie Scholl, who was executed for that. And then fast forward 60 years plus, and when COVID hit, some folks in the UK decided to start a new version of the White Rose with that same intention of spreading guerrilla propaganda. If we have lots of people spreading out information in their areas, all decentralized, then it's going to be really hard to stop. And especially in the world that we have now, where so much of the media is controlled by, Google, and it's such a tight monopoly. So getting out into the real world where we can put up stickers, you can put up, anything that people can actually see really seems to have a great effect. And so basically what this started with is a Telegram group that's now up to like 44,000 members. And then some folks that started making sticker designs. Like here's a couple. Oh, yep. There's the digital version. So there's hundreds of them at this point. When you join the Telegram group, you can just click to download a zip file that has all of those images in them. And then you buy this here Brother printer, which is $100 a piece. And the stickers are on rolls, and it's thermal paper, so there's no ink needed, and they're pretty much waterproof. So for $120, somebody can get 1,000 feet of the sticker rolls and one of these printers and start mass producing propaganda. Since 2020, I've bought 6 of these printers and given them away to different communities where I found people that were really excited so that they could start spinning it up. And yeah, I've been going to a lot of the conferences and stuff I go to. I just bring a big box of these and just set them all out at a table and just, a little sign that says, take as many as you want. Because, yeah, it's like a tenth of a penny to produce, basically. And then when I walk around to towns, I've usually got them in my pockets, and I just slap them up as I go. And it's, thousands and thousands of people all around the world. It's been translated into dozens of languages so far. And, yeah, it's just, getting into the real world, getting decentralized, and getting that message right in front of people in a way that can't really be stopped. The really entertaining thing is when people do try to stop them, and you'll see like claw marks through the stickers because they try to like tear them off of things, and they stick really well.
They look great on gas pumps and police cars.
Yeah, well, there you go. Oh, I would never advocate doing anything illegal, of course, with any of these stickers. Yeah. But at any rate, you use the term propaganda. I prefer the term anti-ganda because really this is counteracting or going against the propaganda. But it can be extremely effective. I had a Solutions Watch on anti-ganda where I referenced the White Rose and linked the Telegram group. Is Telegram still the best way to access this material?
Yeah, it's where most of it is. There's people that spread it out to other places, but the Telegram is like the core spot.
Excellent. Now, Etienne, what is your relation to White Rose?
So I'm a huge fan of decentralized activism. And so when I discovered the White Rose, I began running into the stickers at conferences and at Liberty events. And so over time, I became one of the admins of the White Rose reached out to me. It's completely decentralized. There's no, there are some admins, but there's no head of the snake for the government to chop off. And but through the relationship with the admin, became in the admin group, and then decided, because I liked it so much, I like to do what I like to call culture jams, Banksy-esque. Decentralized, versions. And so what I did is I came up with something that we call the White Rose Mucho Grande, which is a free file of posters that anyone in the world can download and then put up a poster exhibit in a coffee shop, a university commons. You could do a kind of gallery showing of these posters, and these are some of the posters from my book, Government: The Biggest Scam in History Exposed. And just as a refresher, or something for people that are kind of new, I'm the author of this book, Government: The Biggest Scam in History Exposed, where it's really a book designed to kind of wake up your friends, your family, and your colleagues, and we use a lot of visual techniques that bring people to insight much quicker than trying to explain it to them or bring them to a much deeper insight. And one of the techniques that we use is the technique of visualization. And with visualization, you can take something that was invisible to the population and make it visible. And so, one of the examples that I like to use is, if you try and tell your family and your friends that there are 6 media organizations running hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subsidiaries to give everybody the illusion that there's all these different information sources in society, they may or may not believe you. But if you show them a media ownership chart, then all of the sudden they're like, oh my God, there's 6 media companies running hundreds and hundreds of subsidiaries to give everybody the illusion that there's all these different information sources in society. And because they saw it with their own eyes, they come to a much deeper understanding. And it's almost like boom. And it's like, most of society does not know that this dynamic is going on. And so we've already, kind of beta tested these posters. We've had them up at the Greater Reset in Morelia, Mexico. We've had them up at Freedom Fest in Memphis, Tennessee. We've had them up at the Conscious Life exhibit in Los Angeles, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, the Liberty Forum, and others. And it stops people in their tracks. I mean, they literally they're like, what is going on? And all of the sudden, it sparks a conversation, or it just kind of really, opens up a dialogue, or it just instantly brings them to that moment of insight of, oh, something is going on that I didn't understand was going on. And so it's been so successful in that 1 or 2 or 3 or 19, we have 19 different posters covering a variety of, different topics that I'll take, the audience through here. But well placed, these can be seen by thousands and thousands and thousands of people, including people that never, ever, ever would have encountered this information online, either because it's being censored or because they're just not looking at those, types of media outlets. And so we realized, by, beta testing this at all these different conferences, some of which aren't even, liberty-oriented conferences, that we had a hit. And so we launched it officially at Freedom Fest, to great fanfare, and it was a very, very big hit. And so what I'd like to do is I just kind of like to take some of the audience through some of the posters. And when you actually have the poster on the wall and people can kind of like go up and, take a look at it, then it's you're able to kind of, get this detail. But here's just some of the
before we get into the specifics, let me ask. I've got, just so I got this clear, the White Rose Mucho Grande is available as a digital download.
Yes. So we have the pictures available at artofliberty.org/white-rose. And you can see all 19 posters, and you can download them in either a PDF, or you can download them in a high-res JPEG, and you can either have these printed. You can have these, like if you have access to a large format printer plotter at your university or at your company, you can print these out yourself. You can have them printed out commercially. in the government scam store at government-scam.com/store. We sell them at, I think it's like 5% over our cost, just to be able to, kind of get them out. So you can either order the individual posters, or you can order, the entire set. And then you can, we're kind of challenging freedom activists around the world to find the most innovative places where these are going to get the highest amount of visibility. And so, one activist, could impact thousands and thousands and thousands of people by just getting this into the right location. And so we're decentralizing resistance. We're the same way that the White Rose has gotten these out in dozens and dozens and dozens of different countries, in dozens, in thousands, or if not tens of thousands of different places. We now have, we've got the ability to make the exact same impact with these posters.
Awesome.
Woof woof.